All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, a submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead, pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today's white lightning is going to start out kind of ranty because I'm mad.
Yes, we have to be in the current news, and usually we try not to be reactionary, but this is one of the big stories going around right now, and I think I know where Heath's going to go, and I'm
It
not
doesn't
quite.
help that it happened like a 30-minute drive south of me.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
That's extra annoying.
and for all of those people out there that just kind of stereotype Texas, we are a diverse state, and these shenanigans happen here too. In fact, to a large degree, go down to Austin.
Well, this I don't remember who I heard talking about this, but it really is a misnomer to talk about red states and blue states because it's not that cut and dry, and people who act like it is are
practicing the same binary that gets nothing done.
exactly. It really is more about, and it's not a binary either, because I was going to say it's rural versus urban, but it's not, because it's actually kind of separated three ways. It's urban, suburban, and rural.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, instead of just the red versus blue state map, if you look at like a county map or a district map, it makes a lot more sense that way.
Well, and it's even separated even more than that, because we can go to the suburb as the easy example.
Mm-hmm.
So suburban mommies,
Yeah.
again, I'm speaking in generalizations based on the averages. If you're different, don't come at me, bro. But suburban mommies tend to be a little more blue, and suburban daddies tend to be a little bit more red.
Well, I didn't know we were going here. I mean, this is just our setup, but go look up recent polling. Suburban white women is literally the only demographic where Joe Biden in his approval ratings has actually gained points. Every single other demographic he's lost since being elected. He's lost points in his approval rating.
I would like to see why, because I could see the negatives for everybody else, but I could see those negatives also on the middle class suburban females as well. And I see very few positives that are a result of him. There might be stuff they still agree with on that side of the aisle, but as a result of the things he's done, I don't see any real big thing that would cause an uptick. So if you could research why that's the case before next time.
Yeah. So
I could understand staying the same because they don't want to be deplorable, but I don't see why there would be an uptick.
Well, to get to the point here of what prompted all this.
So you can share something without any visuals of the actual event.
Yeah.
You can show news stories with whatever, but.
So here's what we're talking about: the Drag the Kids to Pride, a family-friendly drag show. There's so much wrong just with that title, but this is the only one I'm going to share right now until you talk about why. Now, there were some things I was going to share that I was a little on, because it does actually show some of the kids, and I don't like that. I couldn't.
Well, I guess you can show anything
blurred out.
Yeah, you can show any that don't have the kids in them.
Yeah, those were difficult to find. I will say, well, yeah. So here's this, which is just their, this is the event page. This isn't something they were hiding. This is something they were proud of, which the pride thing, I may want to rant about that for a second too. But I don't know who all is covering this. I know The Blaze and the Daily Wire. I think the Daily Caller had some stuff on it too. There was one video in particular that, even though it had a kid in it, I wanted to show, but I would just suggest anyone go look for it yourself and watch some of these videos, because there's one in particular where there's a young boy who's walking the stage with one of the drag queens, and he looks completely dejected and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's creepy as hell.
This is You're probably going to disagree with me here, but let me kind of give you where I stand in general.
Mhm.
If this was all about just people in drag, that's one thing. But I can't complain. I can't say too much about it from a freedom standpoint. For the same reason, I wouldn't say you could kick out someone who walked in your restaurant in drag, as long as it was appropriate for the dress attire. There's a difference between drag and someone with one of the pictures I saw, penises stuck all over themselves. There's a difference between that. That's not drag. That's just being obscene for the sake of being obscene. So as long as they're within dress code, I would say you shouldn't be able to kick that person out of your restaurant. You shouldn't be able to, or a public square if they're in the middle of the quad between a bunch of places of business.
Mhm.
So for that same reason, this show could go on. It's all the stuff that happened at the show, the freedoms that were taken because we can do it because we're a protected class. That is the problem. That's my stance on it. I know you're probably going to be a little shifted from that, but
Well, not entirely, but
well, I think you probably be a little more judgmental of the parents that would take their kids to it if it was described.
absolutely.
Yeah. But from a freedom standpoint, from a
Well,
legal
no,
standpoint,
let me just yeah, so let's go to the extreme right away and see just how much we disagree. From a freedom standpoint, that goes out the window because kids are involved. Because kids are involved, every single person, including the parents, including the cops who were standing outside doing nothing about it except harassing the protesters, every single person involved in this should be arrested.
but again, I'm separating drag from obscene dress.
I don't know.
We're going to get into the specific event.
The specific event, every single person should be arrested.
If it was a fashion show in drag and none of the fashion was obscene from a sexual standpoint, from an actual showing children the naughty parts of things, then yeah, I would say it should be completely allowed. And parents, it is what it is.
These drag queen story hours that you hear about, it's creepy and gross, and I would be objecting if I was a parent in a a town where this was happening at the library, or if this was happening at a school, I would absolutely be objecting.
Well,
But
and even still, it's the
there is
material they bring.
there is a big difference between those and these drag shows, and I've seen some video of them happening at schools that were, put on by a pride club or whatever. And these drag shows are in and of themselves sexually explicit.
Well, and that's again,
Yeah,
you're like describing the improperly done exercise to demonize the exercise.
well,
You can go to a public park and have a drag show, get your permit and do it, as long as it is within the obscenity laws of being in a public park.
But that's my point, is the point you made right off the bat that should be expounded on, which is this is a protected class, so they get away with it. Go and watch some of these, whether it's this specific incident or some of these other incidences where you hear, the clickbaity headlines about a drag show happening at a high school, and watch these shows and then think, okay, if that was not an individual in drag, but that was a cis hetero individual doing that, that would be sexually explicit. Have we all completely forgotten about the controversy around Netflix and cuties?
Well, even more so, we go back to the 60s. It's Uncle Jim Bob in his trench coat.
The way things are going now, Netflix and cuties could get away with it if instead of 12-year-old girls, those had been 11-12-year-old boys dressed the exact same way, doing the exact same things. And you would have a bunch of people out there saying that it's brave and bold instead of what it was, which was sexually exploiting children.
Well, I like the way it happened with Netflix. Not that they did it, but the fact that it was public outcry, not a legal thing. It was
Well,
it was capitalism at its best, really, where the public said, "Whoa, whoa, this is not right."
I hadn't looked into it lately, but there were some attorneys general who were actually looking into it because it was so explicit that there was some question about whether or not that Netflix had actually broken child pornography laws by airing it in the first place.
Yeah, and they're going down a rabbit hole, which I actually don't disagree with 100%. But look at child beauty pageants. And because they all stayed clothed and nobody was actually explicitly touching in the movie,
Mhm.
it's pretty much on par with child beauty pageants, where you're fully clothed, but you're sexualizing these young children. And
Yeah,
I 100, I actually don't disagree with, punching down on them a little bit. At least making them make it more of a cute dress kind of thing and less sexual the way they do it. But
right. Which was
yeah.
which was one of the many problems with cuties is that the dress and the actions were sexually explicit. Again, and this is what was happening at this specific show at this Dallas gay bar.
Well, do you want to go into the penal code?
Yes,
All right.
that is where I wanted to go here because one of the really freaking annoying things that I keep running into are I was going to share some headlines, but who cares about the lawmakers all, if elected, I'm going to propose a bill that would the hell, how is this not already illegal?
Okay, so this is the best one here because they were doing things like having kids put dollar bills in G strings and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So these are the things that actually happen there. And this is my point. We already have laws against this. This is your
Yeah.
gun law point.
Yeah.
When we had our last talk, that we actually have explicit law against this. Adults and children, any touching of the part of the body of a child, including touching through clothing, through with the anus, breast, or any part of it. And there was another one where they actually had if the child touches you. And I thought that's the one I had up. But yeah, there is the other way around too. If you get the child to touch you, even through clothing. So I think there's no part of a G string that touches your body that is not in the
Uh-huh.
proximity of the genitals or the anus.
Now, this is as the in this section, sexual contact, quote unquote, means the following exact. Is there anything in this penal code that is not about contact? Because you can be sexually explicit, and
That's what I
this is
was
why
looking for when I was
yeah.
going through this, but it actually seems, according to at least Texas law, you have to actually expose yourself. Whether it could be the breast, anus, or genitals.
Be- because I mean, this is what the whole catch a predator thing was. That whatever happened to that, I guess you can't do it now because depending on the protected class, the sexual predator is protected.
Mhm.
But this is why I'm still so infuriated um, with the people who are laughing and dismissing the term groomer. What the hell is this if not grooming?
Well, let's see if groom is in here. Hold on. Nope.
Because you can be hell, you can be arrested for conversations with a minor, even if it's not actually a minor, even if it's a sting where you're talking to a law enforcement individual posing as a minor.
See, this is where you're going to have the legal battle when it comes to just exposure,
Mhm.
because the law, as written, is actually you exposing of the genitals or anus or breast. Uh, it doesn't say anything about implied exposure like you would in a speedo or a G string, you know.
Mhm.
So, and it also doesn't cover again the person with sex toys glued all over their body
Well, there is
because
a so go out of here. There's another thing that I brought up that I looked up because this was referenced. Let me see, where was that? Okay, so this was referenced in one of the things I was listening to. This is uh Texas SB 315. Um so uh relating to restrictions on the age of persons employed by or allowed on the premises of a sexually oriented business, creating a criminal offense. This was doubly infuriating to me when I actually looked up this bill because author's sponsor statement of intent. Sexually oriented businesses are a high risk location for potential human trafficking and exploitation. While these businesses are primarily regulated at the local level, the state legislature has the authority and obligation to enact additional protections for use statewide. SB 315 would raise the age of employment in sexually oriented business from 18 to 21, prohibit sexually oriented businesses from allowing minors on the premises, and hold offending businesses accountable, et cetera, et cetera. What this bill did mostly was simply raise the age from 18 to 21. So most of what this is referring to was already covered. And so what happened at this bar in Dallas was already illegal before this, because we're talking about minor children.
Yeah,
we're not even
but
talking about in that 18 to 21-year-old range. But this indicates to me that the actions that were occurring there were very much illegal.
well, that's why we got to go back to the penal code, because now we're talking what is exposure. Because I could take Ben to Twin Peaks or
Right.
or
But
Hooters.
here's an analogy. If the Spearmint Rhino was holding a similar event on International Women's Day, could you take your kid there?
The what Rhino?
Same exact things. No nudity,
Mhm.
but the same kinds of dress, the same kinds of actions. Could you take your kid there? And would that be acceptable? And would that be legal?
You can take your kid to Mardi Gras. And it's legal. Like, it's not, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it as a parent, but
No, I would not recommend it as a parent, but the ladies getting beads, if you expose yourself and there is a child present, that individual could be arrested, should be arrested, along with the idiot who brought them there, perhaps.
well, you would have
But-
a reasonable doubt situation where if they didn't scan everybody in the crowd, they have a reasonable assumption that it's going to be adults there.
But there's also a big difference between a public event and a private venue that is creating a specific event. A specific event that was, again, this is why the term applies, a specific event that was targeted to children.
Well, and that's the other part where I'm going to have to slide more your direction, is the target audience wasn't the adults, but you can bring your kids. It was bring your kids for this. And that's where we're getting on the grooming, because it was specifically designed for the kids, not for the adults. Whereas if I go to Twin Peaks, it's designed for creepy dad to stare at his waitress while you order food.
Yeah.
And Ben just tags along.
There's also, and this is why I've actually got a clip of a police officer talking about this, which made me go, and I'm gonna share that in a second. If you go to a bar and grill, a bar and restaurant that has a bar, now if it's just a restaurant that serves beer, cocktails, wine, whatever, completely different. But if they have a bar, the bar has to be separate.
Well,
There
yeah,
has to
you can't sit
be-
at the bar if you have a minor child.
You
Yeah.
cannot, a minor child can't, not only cannot sit at the bar, there has to be some kind of division between the bar and the restaurant portion.
The division has been watered down to it's just its
And
own section.
It has
There's-
been watered down,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of times it's kind of silly because maybe there's kind of a little rope thing around it or whatever.
Mhm.
It's nominal at best, but the point is it's there, and a minor is not supposed to cross into that area or be brought into that area. This is just a bar. How was this acceptable at all, period?
Well, you can open up a bar for an event that wasn't utilizing the bar for business
Okay.
purposes. So
Because
if
that's-
you could
that's
you
what
could say
this
this is my
officer-
space, but we're not going to have bartenders here serving drinks and stuff like that.
Okay.
So if they were doing that, then they were breaking the law. If the bar was officially closed, or it was BYOB, or drinks were
Okay,
free,
that
then
makes sense.
yeah.
That makes sense, and that's what this officer was saying. I'm not going to show it
I've
then
looked a
because
lot into opening bars because it was kind of a curiosity of me and a friend. So
because the reporter guy is kind of an obnoxious turd and comes across annoying. And I was also annoyed because he didn't press him. He didn't press the officer who, I guess kudos to the officer at least for engaging and having an honest discussion and answering the questions as frankly as possible. But the Dingleberry kept pressing him on the venue being a bar. How is it okay that kids are in there? And the officer's point was, it's not any different if, say, the VFW was hosting an event. It's
mhm.
the event itself is not, you know, an age restricted thing. Therefore, it just becomes another building. And he never pressed him on the specifics, which is what we're talking about here, is this event specifically. Okay, so let's set aside the venue question for now. What about this event specifically? How is this event okay for children when, one, the event itself is of a sexually explicit nature, and two, you have this specific bill, SB 315, which says that not just minors, but even adults under 21 cannot go into a place of business that is a sexually oriented business. And how is not just a gay bar in general, but this specific gay bar, which has signs, big neon signs that were not turned off, that says it's not going to lick itself, and I licked it, it's mine, and they're not talking about ice cream cones.
Mhm.
How is this not a sexually oriented business? How is any of this legal?
Yeah, and depending on the age, words can be sexual assault. And so
That's what I was talking about with the, you can be arrested if you're chatting online with someone you just think is a minor.
Mhm. So now let's look at going forward. Here's an individual that has important decisions to make, because he would be the one to do the things that need to be done.
Uh-huh.
And he can do this in a way that really excites his base. But I think, as I'm going to get to my second point, because that's why I wrote these down so I don't forget, because he's going to play into activist strategy, and it's going to keep this fight going to rile up the other base. He could do it in that way and just respond knee-jerk reaction and just come down hard on this event. Or he can do it in a way that's very kind of a sober approach, whereas, look, we're not against drag shows, we're not against XYZ, but there were a lot of existing laws that were broken.
Mhm.
And this particular event, as an island, did a lot of the wrong things, and we have to prosecute them, because otherwise other events are just going to keep popping up doing these same wrong things. And
Yeah.
now, second part of that answer, here is how you can do it properly within Texas state law if this is your culture. And he can take that approach, which he's not going to. I can guarantee you that.
Well, I'm semi-optimistic, marginally optimistic, 40% optimistic, because every time I have heard Ken Paxton interviewed, he doesn't talk like a politician, and he doesn't really talk like a lawyer either, which I appreciate. He talks like a normal person. Now,
What was
he's
his background? Was he a judge first?
I'm not sure.
While
Now
you're talking, I'm going to get on his
he's
wiki
certainly
here.
conservative with a capital C, but he's not. I like Ted Cruz, but I get annoyed when I hear him speak, because he's one of those people who just is very clearly always running for office when he talks. and it annoys me, which is why even though I don't always like what he has to say in his policies as much, I appreciate Rand Paul a lot more because he talks more like a normal person who just happens to be an elected official. So when I've heard Ken Paxton speak, it's been like that. So I'll be interested to see what, if anything, he does here. But my larger point is it shouldn't even have to go that far, because before it even makes it to the state attorney general's office, where's the Dallas County attorney general or district attorney rather? Where's the Dallas County district attorney? More to the point, where's the Dallas County sheriff's office? Because you have Dallas City Police here who are to me, from what I have seen and read of the Texas state laws, these Dallas police officers are very clearly breaking the law. So where's the sheriff? Because that's who should be investigating this event, because obviously the Dallas Police Department isn't going to, and the sheriff should be investigating those police officers as well, and whoever ordered them there.
So he was actually a psychology major. Then he got a law degree, and he worked at this Strasburger and Price, which I'm trying to see what kind of law because you can kind of tell what kind of politician they're going to be based on what kind of law they practiced before going into politics.
So that would be my call, not just for this specific instance, but other things like this is contact your local sheriff, because those are kind of our first line of defense as people against a corrupt or inept government. Should be that sheriff who's an elected official and also a law enforcement official. Contact your local sheriff and say, hey, what are you doing about this? Because to my eyes, this seems wrong. The people in Uvalde should be contacting their local sheriff and saying, what did you do during this event? And what are you going to do to investigate these Uvalde police?
He was the one that called the shots, and he got elected to the school board.
I thought that
not
was
the school board, the city council.
I thought that was the city police commissioner.
Oh, you might be right, but it was one of the high up guys, and now he's a politician.
Yes, so. I'm pretty sure that was the city police commissioner. And to be fair, he was elected in an election that happened well before this shooting. And it just so happened that the swearing in happened afterwards.
Yeah. Well, what about a hybrid approach? Because one of the problems we have with the communication of how our government policies should be carried out, when it comes to the federal constitution or the state constitutions or any of that, is the speed of information. We have not adapted to that. What about a hybrid approach where the state attorney general comes out publicly with that authority that you talked about and said, we are all looking into this and they're going to handle this part of it and we're going to put our support behind them?
That would certainly be ideal, because then you wouldn't have one mechanism which could, worst case scenario, be corrupted, best case scenario, just be blinded in some way, that you're going to err on the side of believing these people or protecting these people because that's where you come from. If you have, in an instance like this, there should be multiple investigations going on. There should be in Uvalde, there were there should be a sheriff's investigation going on. There were DPS people involved and they're on the scene. They should be investigating. There was a border patrol agent going on, so the feds should be looking into it as well. And in fact, to me, this all ties together, and it's those cops on the scene that to me just triggered all this, and to me is why this all ties together. And I'm not gonna share these videos because the sound quality is terrible, and I don't know how it's gonna come across if I share it. So I'll just show you. So the Today Show had this guy on, and I've read some of his accounts. This is a Border Patrol agent, Jacob Alvarado. Um, he was the one who eventually charged the room. I think there were a couple of other either police or DPS with him and took down the shooter. And I have read a number of accounts of him talking about how he did so because he was so frustrated with the police lack of action. And he had to borrow a gun. He was an off-duty Border Patrol tactical team member, and he went there to try and help and got increasingly frustrated because nothing was being done. He borrowed a gun and helped storm the classroom.
Almost wonder if I'll watch that interview later. I almost wonder if there was a mini coup
Yeah.
between people like him that came in
Mm-hmm.
and
Well, here's another one. Did this switch over?
yes.
Okay, now this one I wanted to show, but the sound quality is even worse here. Cody Berseno said he has helped bury 5 children who died on that day, including a cousin. This was now, if you watched a lot of the reporting, some of them mentioned that there was a funeral home right next to or right across from the school. He was one of the first responders because they were at work and they heard the truck crash. So they ran out to see what was going on, and you see a bad truck wreck, and their first instinct is to see if they can help the driver. Except then the driver gets out, looks weird, looks at them weird, goes back into his cab and comes out with a gun, which he then proceeds to point at Cody and his coworker. But so it's pretty heartbreaking, especially towards the end, because he talks about having to help prepare the body, prepare the gravesite, lower the casket in of a cousin, a child who died during this attack. And that in and of itself is pretty heart-wrenching. But then you get to the pair ran and Briseño tripped on a curb and fell. He said he saw the man attaching a magazine to the weapon before the sound of gunfire and ricocheting bullets fills his ears. I get up, and as I'm running, I look back, and he was aiming that barrel right at me and my coworker. Another pair of workers at Hillcrest Memorial Funeral Home held its front doors open for the running men and locked them in after they arrived. Briseño looked outside to see the gunman kneeling and reloading and then heading for the school. He phoned his wife. Hey, bring me my gun, he says to her. That's a man. And all of the males standing around outside for an hour and a half were not. And to your point, eventually, finally, someone got fed up. But I still want to know what took them so damn long, because here you have a civilian who his first thought is phone my wife and tell her to bring me my gun. And she does. So that's a woman.
Well, what we would need a timeline. I mean, if I'm going to give the Border Patrol guy a benefit of the doubt, he's pacing, waiting for something to be done. He's trying to convince people to get something done, and eventually looks at the officer next to him, give me a gun. And that was the moment everybody gets behind him.
So for Briseño here, the last bit of this story, gunfire was erupting at the school. He says he saw the man shoot into campus windows. So if you read the various timelines, Daily Beast, New York Times, I know had it, for like 12 to 15 minutes, he was walking around outside randomly shooting at various buildings, shooting into the school for about 12 to 15 minutes. By the time his wife arrived, the first officers were arriving too, Briseño said. He marched ahead, gun in hand, when he was stopped by police. I feel guilty, man, because I couldn't stop him, Briseño said emotionally. He was shooting at the windows, and I didn't have my gun on me. again, to me, this all ties together.
Well, it does.
You have people in positions of authority stopping citizens from handling the matter themselves, and instead, through both action and inaction, protecting illegality.
Okay, you're talking with respect to the police outside of the event as it tying together. Okay. Yeah.
This is why I reflexively roll my eyes and hate the back the blue nonsense. No, you back people who do the right thing, and you oppose people who do the wrong thing. Stop lumping people into groups. This was a mistake we made after 9/11, where we called all, firemen and police were heroes. No, those firemen and police were big damn heroes. And if you watch any of the videos that were taken as the event was happening, you see just how horrific it was and how heroic they were. That does not mean, by extension, all firemen and police are.
Well, and it also oversimplified it, because if you look at the events of that day, those firemen and police were heroes. There were journalists there that were heroes. There were other co-workers there that were heroes. There were people that were helping people get out and ended up trapped. So it's everybody there that sprung to action was a hero. It's just easier to kind of lump it into a nice package box.
I have the book on one of my bookshelves somewhere, but I have grown to hate the title, The Greatest Generation. No, we're June 6th was yesterday. D-Day was yesterday. The anniversary of D-Day was yesterday. Those men were heroes. Some schmuck in a drunk tank in Omaha was not a hero just because he happened to come from the same generation.
Well, not only that, I mean, now we got to define hero. It's a lot of those poor young boys and girls would not have been where they were per their own choice. Remember, they were drafted with threat of being put in prison if they didn't go as a traitor. And there was a giant percentage of those that were in the front of that boat when the gate opened and the machine gun fire started. Hero is a hard term to pin down, because it's doing something in the face of not wanting to do it. But it also is kind of dependent on the result. And so it's a really hard term to pin down. We would probably be in that boat just like all those other young men. And our motives for being there could have been our love for our country. It could have been that thought that I'm protecting everybody back home, or it also could have been I didn't want to go to jail and I hope I get through this. And all three of those motives end up with the same result if you live. The only time it gets a little more clear is if you see the person that ran from it, and then you can kind of divide that line. And that's where we get to where we're at now with the cops in Uvalde. So you got the guy wanting to go into it, and you got the guys who stayed back.
There's another story I didn't bring up, but you can go look up. There's a woman who ran past police. Police kept trying to stop her, and she ran past to try and get her own kids out. And she has been threatened with, she's on probation for something, and she has been threatened with, you'll violate your probation and go back to jail if you talk to the media. Well, kudos to her for not stopping talking to the media.
Yeah, and there was another kid in one of the other shootings in the last couple of years. There's that football player that tried to take the gunman out, even though he didn't have anything, but everybody else in the class got out. And he passed away in the process. That's a hero. He ran towards danger.
I'd forgotten about that one
for other people. So those are the clear-cut cases. So let's get back to Dallas though, so we can kind of stay on task, because this is why I had the second part, not only because I think it's the right thing to do, but I think it's also the most productive thing to do. So the second part was to reach out to the community that, which is really the grand majority of the drag and trans community that don't want to stir this pot and don't want to do wrong things to children. Reach out to them because the reaction is the strategy. You don't think the people who put this thing together knew they were going to get a huge public outcry? Because that's what says that the United States is anti-trans or anti-marginalized citizen.
Uh-huh.
This is a strategy. I keep putting this damn book back up, Saul Alinsky, because he states it plain English in these words. The reaction is the goal. And if you react differently than they want, that's not reacting. That's doing justice, but reacting in a compassionate manner, in this case, to the people that they're actually not representing by doing this show. Your average 40-year-old dude that likes to wear a dress in an alternative community wants to do that around other dudes that like to wear dresses in that alternative community. There's whole community. This is not a new thing. There are whole communities for this. There are burlesques for this, where they go just for that, to be that alternate personality. It's a role play of a certain kind. It's almost no different than playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons at this point, because they are playing a different role that they're not in real life, and they kind of get a little bit of a excited moment in their life because of it. But they want to do it with other consenting adults. That's the grand majority, because they also want to protect children. And most of them are fathers and mothers themselves. And that's the difference. The real drag community is not that. This is an activist attempt to get Texas to drop the hammer and go against the whole trans community in response.
So I didn't say this out
wait,
loud.
I want to separate the drag community. But it will leak over to the trans community, because we also have to separate drag from trans. They're different.
Mm-hmm.
Drag is someone who likes to wear the opposite sex clothes because of that role play element. Trans is you think you are the opposite sex. So
I had this thought when we were first talking about the Uvalde shooting, and then I found the story of this funeral home worker. And I had the thought again when I saw the video of the police standing outside this family friendly drag show, especially since this is happening in Texas. My thought with the Uvalde shooting is, when I saw the first videos of parents outraged, some of them being pepper sprayed and cuffed because they were trying to push past the police who were doing nothing. And my thought was, you're damn lucky those parents didn't have weapons and decide, if you're not going to do anything, we will. And then what happens? Then what happens if those parents, instead of just being emotional and outraged and trying to push past you unarmed, what happens when a mob of them shows up armed
and says, you get out of my way or you're part of the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens the next time? And to your point, I don't doubt there is a number of these activists who are hoping for this, that the next time the protesters show up and some number of them are armed and say to the police, there is child abuse going on in there and you're part of the problem.
Well, there's no doubt that was probably the initial goal. And the fact that the armed people kind of held back is kudos to you. It's actually a testament to why we can have the Second Amendment and still be civil adults. But I think there's another part of the element to that, though, is the people who took their children there aren't the armed group. It would have been people doing it on behalf of other people's children.
Yes.
Had it been their own children, it would have been probably a different situation.
Well, but that, and where this ties into what you were just talking about, is that the people who are part of, in some way, the the Rainbow Flag Coalition, you had better recognize that a certain portion, and I would say a good portion of, and probably most of your leadership are not you. That you think that you have to be afraid of and stay away from those Bible thumping bigots. But I guarantee you, you have more in common with those Bible thumping bigots than the people who are leading your movement, because you think that it's all about, you know, visitation rights and equality under the tax law, which is what the Obergefell decision was all about. Bullshit.
Or
By their
the one that fools those suburban moms we were talking about, just
by
being nice.
by their own admission, the radical rainbow leadership is all about destroying the nuclear family, destroying historical norms, destroying Judeo-Christian morality, and just destroying objective truth.
Yeah, I was
By
gonna
their
say
own
destroying
admission.
biological reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. That is why there is a certain
I'm
number
gonna
who
change
are,
one word for you so I can make you more
yeah,
correct. Dismantling,
yes.
not destroying. Dismantling.
They
That
would
implies you can
destroy,
put something together better.
they would
that fits your thing.
destroy if they could. But the other part of dismantling is it's a process.
Well, they will end up destroying because they have no rebuild plan.
Well, they do, some of them do. Some of them are just the Joker in the Dark Knight and they want to watch the world burn.
Oh yeah.
But what they think they're going to rebuild is nothing new, and it's contrary to human nature and will fail utterly and make things worse.
Always has, always will. But we'll do it
Yes.
different this time.
It's strangely, it's going to be different every time, and yet it never is.
Well, it can work, and I'll tell you how it can work. If we all decide to break up into small, about 100 to 150 people communes, it works that way because you are accountable to everybody else in about 100 to 150 people.
The
Problem is, the country that decides not to do that will just start taking these communes out one at a time until they have all the power.
the only time in history that I know of where communalism has ever worked is the first century church, because
Well, it still works to this day. It still works in hunter-gatherer tribes.
I don't think it's quite the same, but yes, and probably
Well,
for the same.
different results. We have better medical care and we have better all
But
of these other
no,
things.
no,
But from a
that's not what I
societal
mean.
standpoint, from everybody cooperating with
But
each other.
probably similar to the same reasons it worked in the first century church is, one, it was totally voluntary. Two,
Not in all eras of the
yeah.
church, you know.
Two, it was no, that's why I said that's why I specifically said the first century church. Two, it was totally altruistic. I would also add a third, which is if you read like the book of Acts, along with say Revelation, which is really weird, but a lot of the first and second century church, when Jesus talked about his coming again, they thought that was right around the corner. They were willing to put everything into the communal work because they assumed that within their lifetime or their children's at most, the world was going to end.
Well, I'll add a fourth one. The numbers were still small.
That's also a good point. The numbers were still small.
We didn't have a nation of 50 states with
nope.
330 million people, different.
You didn't have mega churches. You had small individual churches inside people's homes. And then the church as a whole was not especially big.
Well, and you still see a little bit of infighting between those churches addressed within the actual, where Paul is trying to bring everybody together. Peter's trying to mend this bridge between this church and this church. And you see a lot of that as well. So the smaller the scale gets, the easier it is.
And to your point, even then, it wasn't smooth. It wasn't perfect.
Well, the smaller the group is where you know everybody, the more the original tit for tat works better, because it's kind of hard to get away with being the con artist if there's only so many people to con without everybody else knowing about it. Whereas you got 330 million people in this country, you can be a snake oil salesman all over the place. You just keep moving.
Circling back to what this is all about, to that point, that's one of the reasons I said call your local sheriff, right? So whether this is whether you live in or around the Dallas area, or if you just want to be preemptive, contact your local sheriff, contact or go to your local city council meeting and say, hey, if you're in Texas, hey, do you guys know about SB 315? Because what happened here, by the text of this, from what I see and from what I think any same person sees, this is already illegal. So if this happens here, what are you going to do about it?
Now,
That's why you start on the local level, because it's smaller and it's more known.
To your question via text, the citizen's arrest moment's already passed. You would have had to been one of the citizens in the moment.
Well, that's why I asked you that question, because it went along with what I'm so concerned about as the radicals keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And to your point, I think hoping to get this, which is that, again, what happens next time when the protesters all or in part are armed and say to the police, you're part of the problem, you are breaking this specific law, you're under arrest. We're executing a citizen's arrest. Do you think the police are going to stand for that? And then what happens? So you'd better preempt this, whether you're just some schmuck like us or you're actually in a position of power. You'd better preempt this and say, okay, if this or something like this happens, this is what needs to be done, or else we are in for a bad situation. Because as bad as things are, don't worry, it can always get worse.
You know, and the sad thing is, I was just thinking of what would be the proper counter protest, because the people standing outside the door with, you know, God loves our children or whatever, whatever kind of normal conservative banner there's going to be, are not really effective. It's, again, it just creates an us versus them thing. But what about like this completely secular, at the moment you are violating SB, blah, 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 and I have pictures, you know, this is a, you know, class 3 felony because you're touching a minor in this specific way. But then at the same time, I was just thinking of that, but you would technically be doing something illegal if you were taking pictures as well. So it's realistically, that would be a tough one to nuance.
Well, I do know that you can technically break, this sounds weird, but you can technically break the law to reveal law breaking.
Okay. Yeah. If you're covered under something like that, then
that's what whistleblower laws are all about, is that, yes, technically you signed an NDA, but what they're asking you to keep covered up is illegal. So you can get away with breaking your NDA.
Yeah. Okay. So this gets to the point. So Heath mentioned that I didn't want him to share any videos or pictures that had a minor in it. If something were to happen where these things were to be deemed illegal and we had shared pictures and videos, we would have been distributing child indecency material. And even though so many people have done it, it probably would be a slap on the hand to everybody involved. It still could have been a YouTube kick, or it could have been something.
It's also just plain creepy. I mean, I watched a lot of these to see what it was all about and be able to say, you know, authoritatively and honestly, I know what I'm talking about because I looked at this stuff and it's not pleasant, especially the one I told you that should most certainly be watched is the most unpleasant one, which is this poor kid who, I mean, we were dorky, shy kids when we were kids. And so, you know, your own. And I just had a visceral reaction when I watched this kid walking with the diva, walking with the drag queen at the behest of his parents. And he did not want to be there.
Yeah, we're going to have to close this one down if we're going to do anything else, because I got a 3 o'clock client.
Yes. And it's
but
just making me angry and go around in circles.
yeah, we that's why I picked that moment to put that in there, because we are kind of starting to loop in circles. And I think there's a proper way to do it. And my answer is not complete, obviously. I would like legal people to kind of fill in blanks on that. But at the same time, I think it's at least a good PR approach. And when we're out of the moment, and it's not a citizen's arrest type situation, it is the court of public opinion.
Yeah.
Because we need to put pressure, but not pressure in a way of damning things, but specific to the events that happened there, not to the community. And I think that if you got a talented speaker and people to kind of get all the facts put together, you could probably put something together that can fulfill that goal. It's not going to fire up the base like you would like, because those are the videos. That's reason number two. I didn't want the videos up. I wanted it because of possible legal reasons. But if we can't convince you via the facts and just the analysis of the situation without, tapping into that limbic system, then we don't have a case. And I think there's a place for that. It's not that I'm a robot. Don't accuse me of being that. I just know there's times and places where you really have to resist that urge to react that way. And when it comes to masses of people on all kinds of parts of the aisle, that's the time to resist it, because everybody's going to have a different response, and only the worst are going to have the emotional response that does something. So if I can't convince you without showing you something that's going to piss you off, then I don't have a case. Now that's where the evidence comes in. That goes to the police, to the court. But that's for people who are qualified to handle that stuff without getting arrested. Need to go with that. That's my end of it.
I think that's a good place to stop it, and we'll take a little break here, and then, stick around for the fun so we can take a break from this infuriating seriousness, and we'll go back to some Wheel of Time reread discussion.
Yeah, part two will be Wheel of Time. It's going to be a shorter one because I've got barely an hour. If we want to do any spoilers, we'll have to cut it pretty short on the story part.